most influential writers in comics, which is amazing. And I gotta put a plug in for this. If you do not follow her on Twitter, it is the place to be. Yeah, it is a fun ride on Twitter with her. Sometimes I just spend days going through it. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You want a mic?
Oh yeah, I get it.
First of all, cosplayers, stand up. Let us take a look at you if you don't mind. Awesome cosplaying.
So how this is going to be set up today, we're going to do, we're an hour, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we're going to do some me questions with Gail for a little bit, and then we're going to open up to Q&A with you guys, because it's about you guys, that's why we're here. So yeah, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, and we're going to open up to you guys, so if you're thinking of anything while we're here, feedback?
Yeah. Don't ask me if I like Cyclops, though.
No, we're getting into Cyclops, because Cyclops is my dude, and she doesn't like him. So yeah, so think about questions right now while you're sitting here, and you're ready for stuff. Is it this one?
I don't know.
That's already better. Thank you. And we're going to open it up to you guys and pass the mic around with you guys. Have some fun with that. So, how many cons do you normally do a year?
I try not to keep track because then I will feel overwhelmed. I probably get about 150 inquiries or so. So one reason I'm really happy to be here is I don't get to come to the smaller, comic-centric, super creative, all about that and all about the people who come too often. So I'm just really honored to be here, and it's been amazing so far. So thank you guys for coming.
And you don't come out to the East Coast for a lot of cons.
I do, because I'm usually in New York, and
Okay.
then I've done Baltimore, and I've done Annapolis, I've done, some.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I do. I am from the West Coast, though. That's probably why he's like, you don't get out to the East Coast much, but I do.
Okay, very cool.
It's just that, like, I've done Heroes Con, and I do MegaCon and things like that, but I do try to spread it around as much as I can so that I can get to areas that I haven't been before, because I love to see comic readers from everywhere, and I love seeing different areas of the country and the stores and the way they run them, and the people who go to them, and it's just been such a privilege and such a change in my life to be able to do that and meet people from all over.
So when you get a break from dealing with us awesome people, what are you working on right now? What are you gonna go type out?
Right now, I am finishing up Hot Shots. And with Hot Shots, I'm really proud of this particular run, because I think it kind of shows why Marvel is special and why Marvel is different from other comic book companies out there, what makes them special. It's kind of, you get the feeling of that in this Hot Shots run. Also, I am working on Death Defying Devil for Dynamite, which is something I love. Pulp Heroes, he's a Golden Age hero. He was probably one of the first urban vigilante style heroes that I can think of. And this particular story, Walter Giovanni's drawing it. He was the artist for Red Sonja, and he's amazing. He's making it look gorgeous. And it's kind of, we get to see what it's like to have superheroes in kind of a Twilight Zone story. So it's really, there's nothing else like it. It's really different, and really proud of how it's coming out.
How did that start? Did you go, hey, I want to write this kind of book, or did they approach you about that?
It's sort of both, because I do things for Dynamite on and off, and they know what my tastes are, and they know, okay, I've written so many female characters in a row, which I love, but now let's do something a little different. They know I like those classic heroes, and I like to kind of put a spin on them, and so whenever they'll come to me with a few projects, and then I'll pick one that I think sounds really exciting and different, that I can do something different with.
I gotta jump on that really quick. How cool is it that people go, I got a bunch of stuff for you to work on. Which one do you want to do?
I know. Does that sound really bad?
No, it sounds amazing. It sounded incredible.
I have, for those of you who don't know
Just pick a thing. You can do it. We'll let you.
For those of you who don't know my origin story, I was a hairdresser. And I started writing humor pieces online just for fun. And that led to a weekly column, and that led to Simpsons, and then Deadpool and Birds of Prey. And so it's just like a really weird origin story. But being a hairdresser, which I loved, it was a creative field, you know, I liked doing it, but you're tied to that chair. You really are. And this has just done so much for my life. And I thank every single one of you who, you know, buy comics, who support the industry completely, because it just has opened up my world so much, being from a little tiny farm in Oregon, outside of a tiny town, dreaming of being able to travel and see the world and stuff, not knowing and being told repeatedly that it could never happen is quite extraordinary. So I was the wrong everything, just so you guys know. and I feel very fortunate.
So a lot of writers, they use whatever their meaning is to explore a different part of themselves, to get out there and, you know what, I'm going to write. We're talking about Swamp Thing earlier, and Len Wein doing stuff there, and exploring his own darkness and doing stuff like that. Any of the books that you've done where it's really like you're putting yourself into it, or kind of going through a journey that way, using it as, you know, therapy almost, to write a story about it? Like, you can say no. I mean.
I don't really approach writing quite in that way, because I feel like, you know how people have that cliche, write what you know? That's all great and everything, and I think that it's pretty good advice, but my advice is try to know more. And so, so know more outside of yourself, and of course, things are going to come from my perspective, but I try really hard to make them come from other people's perspectives, other, you know, points of view. And so, you know, I have a training in theater arts, and we were taught, you know, in university on how to build a character from the ground up and layer them on and figure out how their dialogue would be and what their speech pattern would be and that kind of thing. So creating characters, I do it more like that. They're not really avatars for myself. I like to try to reflect society and what's going on in society more. And like, if you take a look at when we did the reimagining of the ventriloquist in the Batgirl storyline, it was definitely a reflection of people who are addicted to celebrity. And so I would take things like that and put them into the stories and the characters, and Batgirl having post-traumatic stress disorder and just different things that we're dealing with today as a society will make it into the book. You know, you're gonna see things from my perspective. I feel very strongly that my early experiences with Batgirl, for instance, was on the syndicated Batman television show, and I was a super shy, social anxiety kid in school, the only one with red hair and super fair skin and freckles and all that, and I was teased a lot, and then being shy on top of it, it was pretty traumatic to go to school. And I lived on a farm, and we got barely any TV, and what we did get was like black and white news and black and white bowling and things like that, and so boring. So I read a lot from a really young age, but one day we were watching that Batman television show, and Batgirl came on, and first of all there was all this color and action and vibrancy, and then there was this character who was a smart librarian who I felt was smarter than Batman even, who could kick ass. And it just opened my eyes so much that I literally went to school the next day and raised my hand more, talked more, fought back against people that were teasing me and things. So it just made this huge difference. And when I started going to conventions and seeing who was attending conventions, because you hear, I'm in a little tiny town, didn't have a comic store, you hear all the stereotypes of who reads comics and stuff, and I started going to Comic Cons, and it just wasn't true at all. And I felt like comics needed to open up. And so that's the perspective that I come from. So yes, it is me, because I have that feeling that people should be able to experience that, not just a certain type of person. And when I write something, I try to approach it as, try to think of something I haven't seen before.
So without going into story details, of course, do you have like a dream book? Do you have something you're like, man, I wish they would give me the reins of something?
There's a couple characters that I'd love to write that I haven't really had a chance to. I don't know if you want me to write that.
We're going to have a coffee later and have a discussion about Cyclops.
I would love to write the Marvel family. Maybe meaning, Shazam, Mary Marvel Jr. I would love to do that. DC knows that I would love to do that, so I don't know if it's ever going to happen, if it hasn't happened yet. We'll see. And then Spider-Man is another one. I would love to do Spider-Man, and I like the idea of getting back to a slightly creepier version of him. Funny, but creepy too.
Cool.
Like he was when he was first created, but modern, if that makes sense. And then, speaking of projects that I'm working on and trying to do things that I haven't done before, another thing that I'm doing is I am what they call the architect of the superhero universe for Lionforge. I just say I'm a superhero guru, and it sounds a little bit more like what I'm doing. But and so, how many people are familiar with Lionforge, with their books, because they're nominated for quite a few Eisners this year, and they publish books for everyone, which is really exciting to me. And when I first got the call from them and they explained the company mission and stuff, I was just like, this is what I've been dreaming to happen for, all my whole life, really. And they start talking about their superhero universe and Catalyst Prime, and which basically is Earth. It's very real world, very modern. Some humans were exposed to a certain thing that gave them different powers, that manifested powers differently. And I'm writing this big event comic for the company that will start coming out in October called 7 Days. And 7 Days is basically this superior being comes to Earth, and he takes over all the media channels, all media, and he says, I am taking over Earth, my planet's dead, this is my new planet now, I am going to kill every living thing on this planet.
As you do.
Yeah. Every living thing on this planet is going to be annihilated, and I'm going to create it for me. But I'm not a monster. You have 7 days to get your shit together and figure out what you want to do in those 7 days. So we see what happens when the entire Earth has PTSD because there was an event that happened previously that was traumatic too. And what they do with those 7 days. Some people will, kind of hole up in their house with their family and spend those 7 days with their loved ones. Some will go out on top of a building and start shooting people. Some first responders will not show up to work. If you're a fireman, policeman, border patrol, any of those, do you bother going to work? And if you only have 7 days left to live. So we really see what happens to Earth when it's given this situation.
And that book again is called?
7 Days.
And it comes out?
Comes out in October, starting in October.
And
by Lionforge.
You can get that from your local comic book store.
Yep.
Support your local comic book stores, everybody. Go order the book.
And it's the one thing that I love about it is the characters are very varied. There's a lot of variety. We see what superheroes born of today are like. And that's really exciting for me too, because we don't have 70 years of history that we have to try to make fit into today's sensibility. This is already there. And so I'm really proud and really excited, and the creative teams that are working on the books that follow 7 Days are amazing. We're separating things into genre, and we have tons of variety, like I said. And for those of you who maybe have seen Queen Credible, written by Rodney Barnes, which is a young African-American boy in New Orleans who only has the power of invulnerability. He doesn't know how to use it, he doesn't know anything, and it's one of the best teen new superheroes since Ms. Marvel, in my opinion. It's so good. So if that's already on the stands. If you haven't checked that out, check it out, because it's really well written and beautiful. And then I'm also working on a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. Which is really amazing because it's this really cool world where the main characters are birds. But it's just, the art is amazing. It's a gorgeous world they've built, and it's called Humblewood, and I'll be doing that.
The second you started saying that, my friend Matt over there, he's like this.
My husband and I met playing D&D, so
Okay.
eventually I had to get there.
He loves you and he loves D&D, so he's like, say what? So what is this going to be? Is this going to be a comic, or is this going to be a D&D adventure?
It's going to be a D&D adventure, but I am writing the comic that ties into it.
Super cool. That's really cool. So, has there ever been a storyline that you wrote, and you go back a couple years later, and you're like, damn, that was good. Like, do you ever, like, which ones make you really proud?
I don't know that I've ever said, damn, that was good.
Yes, because you're good.
But I'm really proud of several things. I'm really proud of the Birds of Prey run because there really hadn't been anything quite like that before. We had a team of women who were different from each other, who liked each other even though they didn't always agree, and they could get shit done without fighting about boyfriends and, you know, getting into those kinds of things. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of my Wonder Woman run, especially the Circle story, which is the first arc that I wrote, because it's completely female. It deals with so many feminine and female-oriented themes that really hadn't been explored in Wonder Woman before for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because dudes wrote it, whatever. But, you know, because it deals with jealousy and sisterhood, and you know, what would it be like to live on an island of women when only one person is allowed to have a child. And so we dealt with a lot of things like that, and courting, like once Wonder Woman started having, you know, a love interest, what would that be like? And so we reversed a lot of power positions and stuff in the artwork for that. That really hadn't been done too much before either.
So tying into something that you just mentioned, over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more women writers taking on big books, headlining a lot of books, and it's changed the dynamic of comics. It's changed the tempo, the story, all of that, and it's really it's so amazing to watch. It's such a great thing to see, and it's about time.
Well, it's amazing. Yeah, I'm so proud of all the female writers out there in the storylines they're doing, and that they're not being stereotyped into doing only certain types of books and things like that. But imagine, you know, we have a ways to go. I'm not going to lie about that, but we are doing, you know, from 10 years ago, we've come a long ways. But imagine I was on so many panels in the beginning where I was the only female on the panel, and I was literally explaining why different shapes of boobs are important. Because we had so much of the same body shapes in comics and same everything, just a different hair color and different costume. And so, you know, explaining and then moving that on to not just women, onto other characters too, why we needed more variety, why would we purposely cut out potential audience because we just are focusing on this one thing. And so we had a lot of weird conversations. A lot of people were very open about it. A lot of people were not happy about it.
And it's something subtle like that is an obvious thing. Like, you draw all the dudes different, why don't you draw the women different? But it makes a difference. Like, my daughter's looking at the comics and it connects with her. She understands something like that. And it's like you said, it's amazing people don't think about things like that. But it's very true. Even with the best artists out there.
Who write or draw what they like or want.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to know more and get beyond that. So think about maybe your audience a little more.
Very cool. Who are your favorite other writers right now? Let's get some shout outs.
Oh my goodness. Marjorie Liu.
Love her.
G. Willow.
Can you hook me up with an autograph? I miss her at every con. She always does.
I never had her autograph either.
Oh, you met her parents?
Yeah, but I have better parents and got to hang out. Tom King. I'm trying to think about people who are currently doing John Layman.
You like Tom Taylor a lot.
Yeah, Tom Taylor is one of my absolute favorites.
Yes,
I met him when he was first starting in Australia, and I remember saying to him, because he was telling me something that was going on with an editor, and I said, Tom, do not let them take the part out of your writing, no matter what. Hang on to that. And I don't know if he listened to me or what, but that's what really attracted to me to his writing in the very beginning, is it always had this really amazing sense of art to it. So So I'm really glad that he became as successful as he has.
Any artists you really want to work with?
Cooper. I've been so blessed with artists, you know, it's hard to, you know, pick out something like that. Like with 7 Days, I'm working with a new artist that I haven't worked with before, and he has done a few things for DC, but he hasn't really blown up yet. He's from Brazil. Jose Luis is his name, and the art is amazing.
Yeah.
I think after 7 Days, he's going to, you know, be doing probably more bigger projects for the big two. But I like to work with artists that are right at that point too.
So for your scripts, do you normally, I've seen there's, so when people do these comic book scripts, the writers, there's different ways to do it. You can have a lot of direction in there for the artist, you can have just a little bit. If you know the artist and you're a great team, you know, you need less direction. Do you tend to put a lot of detail in how you want the panel to look and set up, or do you really mostly focus on dialogue?
I actually do have some scripts at my table, so if people are really super interested in what a Gail Simone script kind of looks like, you can come down there and look. Or in this Red Sonja trade paperbacks, there'll be one script in those.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I write what is called full script. And when I first started writing comics, I'd never seen a comic book script. I didn't know really how to do it. The people at Bongo very carefully, not carefully, but said there's about 4 main ways, this is what they are, choose what you think works best, and then I've kind of refined it since then for myself. But I would say a 22-page comic is probably about a 50-page script for me, just to give you kind of an idea. I always tell the artists that if they come up with a better way visually to tell the story, to go for it. I have no problems with that. So I really try to focus on, like, if you read one of my scripts, you're reading a story, basically.